This is a dog, and don't worry, he'll be okay. But I have to look him in the eyes right now and tell him that there are no good dog games where you play as a dog in a human world. Because interestingly enough, if you don't count mobile, Dog's Life, an early 2000s game that allows you to quite literally launch your own logs at people, is pretty much all we've got. Why though? Surely there's some value to this concept. How could the industry go so long without seeing something similar? Well, we will see that there was an attempt to approach this concept again later, but that kinda went wrong. So let's start with Patient Zero, the cursed PS2 game. Look at key examples of what's already out there and see where it can go and if it's even worth it. Alright, so if you haven't seen Only Plays or anyone else struggle through this, Dog's Life is a free roam kids game where you play as Jake, who's on the pursuit to save his girl from some dog nappers. That's the basic setup. Frontier is the company behind it, which I kinda think is funny because it's a very American game made by British people, and roaming around as Jake, you get to dig up bones, make friends, follow scent trails, bark at people, and do a lot of dog-themed minigames, as well as interact with the odd gimmick here and there, like making this parrot crash out. Crackers. The general gameplay loop is to collect as many bones as you can. You can find some, be gifted some, and win them after beating a minigame. You need bones to be able to take control of other dogs that each have some kind of special trait to access other locations or simply obtain mission critical items. I would say that it's a shame that many quests are fetch quests, but in this case, that makes sense and I can't be mad about it. Now, at first, I didn't think much of this game because it was just a simple go here, find some bones, and then maybe mess about type experience. Probably would have enjoyed it more as a kid. However, I did notice something when I was using the Sniffo Vision mechanic to collect 50 purple scent marks in the hope to obtain another bone. It was the profound realization that I was quite literally doing this. I became Dog. And I was doing what a dog does, sniffing around a field on pure impulse. For me, the impulse was nothing more than the drive to complete an objective. I had to find all those 50 scent marks to get something. But for a real-life dog, the impulse is driven by the need to know what's going on, who's been around, and a curiosity to find something new. Scent is a dog's primary source of information, and the reward is obtaining such. We doom scroll, they zoom. I, the human player, can understand why a dog does what they do, but I can never feel it. Neither do I have the impulse or care to do that activity on its own. A game where you play as a dog can be as simple as going off the leash and doing what you do as a dog controlled by a human conscience. That's what makes these types of games fun, and Goat Simulator is a classic example of that. You're not playing the experience of a goat, you're just messing around as one, which is what inspired me to give this dog a super bark ability that turns people into physics objects that you can launch across the map. You can explore this level for free on my Patreon, by the way. It's not a game, it's a set piece, but support does help towards the budget on these videos. Now, what I appreciate about the developers who made Dog's Life is that they try to bring you into the dog's perspective and give you reason to do so. That's why you can only see scent through Jake's point of view. It's also cool how they try to emulate a dog's vision with the world around you looking more dull, but then to contrast that heavily with colourful must-collect scent marks. By doing this, they gamified a dog activity and provided a reason to continue doing it. There's a reasonable connection between the human player and the animal experience to actually try and take part in the animal experience, or at least the simulation of it, instead of just dumping logs on skiers. But what if you take a common dog activity or just the perspective of a dog and put it into a survival situation? This is just a kid's game where even getting chased by the dog catcher's dog lasts less than a minute. I'm not even kidding. And a big part to any animal's ability to survive are their heightened senses combined with a primal instinct. Bark is the name of a psychological horror game where you play as a poor little Yorkshire Terrier whose owner is an absolute arsehole. The whole point is that you must survive through 7 days, with the 7th being your, I'd say in quotes for now, freedom. We'll get to that later. The game is pretty simple in principle. You do certain dog-like activities to gain points that can help you to increase your stats for the 7th day. Activities such as barking at cats, pushing random objects about, chasing small animals, marking territory, and basically just doing what a dog would do if left to their own devices. If we want to talk about bringing you into the dog's perspective, this is it. However, there's a little bit of a problem with acting like a dog, because by doing these things, you raise suspicion, and eventually, as a result, your owner will come looking for you. This is what you need to hide, by using your speed and height to your advantage. But not only that, your God-given instinct to, by their words, sense aura. When you activate your sense, for a brief moment you can see where your owner is through the walls, and you can also see non-threatening things too. It's very self-explanatory and very easy to understand. Although I will say it is a bit literal, and they could have shown a vague mist of where he could be instead. But it's a cool mechanic, because what the dev tried to do here is combine the dog's hearing with their overpowered ability to smell things. And for how brief it is, it provides a fair enough advantage. Where things get really interesting though is when you begin to stress. You ever hear a dog barking at something? Maybe you're looking at an empty corner, seeming concerned about a thing that isn't there? Well, in this game, there are certain things, like barking at this freaky looking dog, that can trigger a panic attack. When you're in this state, everything goes red and you start to see more dogs sniffing around the place. They aren't real though, and are mere manifestations of your paranoia. But you're playing a dog, and you, the player, must respect that, so there are only two ways to avoid them. One is to simply run away. However, there will be situations where you're pinned down, and all you can do is bark. Bark at nothing. The reason why this is quite clever is because barking causes noise, and noise will reveal your location. But here's the thing, it's still in your control to do so, you don't have to bark. Yet what if it wasn't? When you hear sirens in the distance, you'll begin to howl. This is a big problem because now you can't move and you're making a lot of noise. It's an easy enough concept to grasp that you're playing as an animal, but it's very easy to forget that you're controlling one. Like touching a hot stove, this is a stark reminder that our pets have primal impulses. Impulses that even they lose control over. I like this mechanic for multiple reasons. It's a good way of preventing the player from camping because it is just easy to find a corner and stay there, but you're also given enough time to find a spot to howl, and it's a smart way to include a hazard. Now, bark isn't the only game where I noticed primal fear within the animal being used against the player. No, in fact I found a pretty good example in this game, Little Kitty Big City, a game where you play as a little kitty who fell into the big city and is trying to get out. Some people may already notice that the premise for this game is similar to another. Don't worry, we're covering that one soon. But by the sheer impulse of being a cat, you despise water. A very shallow puddle that you could probably just walk through is an obstacle to you. And I love this in particular because it's a really smart way to play on the fear that some cats have of even just touching water. And just to add to the whole primal impulse thing, you can get jump scared by cucumbers, which I personally think is a pretty nice touch. Now, to go on a bit of a segue here, seeing as I'm bringing up this game, Little Kitty Big City is a great example of basically just giving the player the ability to play as the animal in question within an open world setting. Dog's Life does have that, but what this game does in particular is essentially reward you for every little bit of exploration. There's a reason why some people say curiosity killed the cat, because curiosity is a big part to what it is to be a dog and a cat. What's also nice about this game is that as a cat, you have the agility to climb about. Mischief is also a pretty big thing. You can make people trip over in this game and you can steal their phone. If Dog's Life is to dump logs, this game is just to, I guess, push things off the ledge. But to go back on track here, what I noticed whilst playing this game, something that should have been so obvious before I even wrote the script, was that the animal that I'm playing is limited. Limited by things that I, the human, wouldn't be. Just to give an example, there's a quest where you need to find some ducklings, and to rescue one of them from the laundromat, you need to charge into a button to stop it. Clearly, the button was too strong for me to push it, but as a human, I wouldn't have any trouble with that. It was a similar thing getting into the place. The door was locked. The place was locked up and I wasn't even meant to be in there. So if I was playing as a human to get into this place, the requirement would be most likely for me to find a key of some sorts. That would be the appropriate thing. But let's say, for example, I am a cat or I am a dog. Can I actually use a key? No, not a card key, just a traditional key. Obviously not. unless you're a midwit and say technically yes. If we're going to be using cat games as examples for a dog concept video, then Stray is a really good one to use, especially when it comes to limitations versus strengths. Stray is a short but sweet adventure about a cat who fell into a post-apocalyptic city full of nice robots, not nice robots, and advanced bacteria, where the main goal is to escape. Sounds very similar, and it is kind of funny how Little Kitty Big City basically took the same premise as Stray. But in this game, progression is quite linear, and doing optional cat things is mostly cosmetic. However, with that being said, everything you do is still very much in a cat way. It's very cat-coded. And where you struggle to gain access in certain situations becomes an opportunity for you to find another way. Want to open a door? Then scratch at it. Maybe someone's going to open it for you. Want to use a laser gate? Then use a barrel to roll past it. Want to sneak inside this shop? Well, first you got to go to a bar to find a lazy drunk delivery guy, gently wake him up, follow him to work, and jump into a box to get smuggled in. One of the best moments in the game for me was the jailbreak, because to actually break out had to be a joint effort between me and a friendly robot. Without me, they'd have never been able to escape, because for me, grabbing the key was no problem. I could simply just walk through the bars. Also, without me, this robot would be stuck, because there are times where only I can fit for a vent to activate something on the other side to open the door. Let alone the section where there are all these drones about, all these different lasers, where my agility is best suited here. What the developers did is took the limitations of the cat and made room for you to use their strengths to solve a problem, but also to make it very clear that this world wasn't made with you in mind. I think one of the best moments to depict this is when you get stuck in this room and the only way out for both of you is to open the door from the control room that's on the other side. To do this, you need to push some bricks on the floor, which will then trigger the robot to pick one up. They'll then throw it at the window above the door, but it's still too high for you to get up to. So what they do is simply crouch down so you can jump on their head, and they give you a lift that's high enough for you to jump up and over, allowing you to unlock the door from the other side. What this level ultimately represents is that, yeah, sure, I could make it pretty far as a cat because this place wasn't made with me in mind. However, because it wasn't made with me in mind, it's still an indirectly hostile place that would keep me contained if it wasn't for my humanoid friend. Now, here's the thing about Stray. For a good portion of it, you're helped by B12, your own drone buddy who can translate for you, hack consoles, and remove one of the major limitations to being an animal without opposable thumbs: carry capacity, or the lack thereof. B12 can simply digitalize important items and store them for you. But when you don't have access to him, the one at a time carry capacity kicks in. And I think with this topic in mind, there's no better game to highlight the fun of this limitation than the Untitled Goose Game. A game where you wreak havoc on the British public as a treasured pond animal. The gimmick of playing as a goose is a great catch, and it did wonders for marketing. Yet it was the simple ability to cause chaos and make specific things happen in spite of your limitations that made the game fun. Picking up objects and running around with them is easy enough when it's light, but try to move something heavy and you can feel it. Obviously you don't have hands, so it's all beak, the occasional flap of the wings, and a menacing honk. The whole point of the game is to complete a few mischievous tasks on a checklist. This could be as simple as petty theft, locking someone out of their own garden, or breaking the broom that was meant to keep this woman safe. However, to achieve certain things, you need to use your beak to the best of its ability. For example, I had to swap this kid's glasses out with some that I stole from the store. But there's a problem. He's too tall and rightfully scared of my impressive wingspan. So to distract him, I need to peck at his shoelaces to untie them. This will trigger him to get down on my level so I can snatch his glasses and replace them with the stolen ones. It's also funny that you can steal his toy plane, place it back in the shop, and basically force him to pay for it again. This game is categorized as a villain protagonist for a reason, because you can also bully an old man at the pub. But you see, I can't just throw items into a bag. I've got to grab stuff one at a time, but also stash things so they don't get picked up again. This one at a time carry capacity works well for something like this, something that's smaller scale, but unless you want to give the animals some kind of special backpack that they can easily access, it's going to be difficult for most animals to remove this limitation. And you've got to be careful with it too, because in Dog's life, fetching multiple things means you just got to go back and forth between the quest giver and the items, which can, in all honesty, feel like needless padding if a fetch quest didn't already. Now, I almost did that video essay thing where I promised to come back to something but never do, and you've probably already forgotten what that was. It was bark. The freedom of the outdoors in bark. On the 7th day, you'll see that the front door is open. Finally, you're free of this hell house, yet unfortunately, you find yourself in another hell. Out here, you can score massive points by chasing small animals and doing all the dog things you could have inside. But you still need to be careful, because there are other dogs to be wary of, which are basically just the same German shepherds you've encountered a million times by now. Food is a must, and the saddest part about it is that you already know where to find it. I mean, to relinquish any kind of thirst, you had to drink from the toilet as well. But all in all, out here, I didn't find that much to do. The focal point of the game isn't really to play as a stray dog. Dog's life affords more free roam, yet it's less so about survival and more so about completing levels and minigames. It's a similar thing with Little Kitty Big City. There's not really much of a survival element to it. And Stray itself is not so much a game about experiencing the stray cat life. It's more so a linear puzzle game with some hub areas to explore. You see, out here on the streets, there's an easily forgotten underbelly within the human world, an animal kingdom that still exists, with a whole different set of rules and a whole different reality to survival for those who don't have a place to call home. And strangely enough, during my research, I found that there was an attempt made to explore this aspect quite a while ago. It was called Home Free, and I feel like it's worth explaining what went wrong with it before getting your hopes up on what it promised to deliver. Back in September 2014, Kevin Concien debuted a multiplayer proof of concept called Dog Park that demoed gameplay of you being able to play as a dog with other dogs. And this would be the game that would later grow into Home Free, as detailed in their Kickstarter that launched a year later. The scope of the project went from being just this to an open world RPG where you play as a stray dog in a big city. That I think is worth adding would have been procedurally generated. They secured a decent amount of funding of nearly 100k, stretching the goal to include cats as well. It was confirmed during October 2015 that the game would be released on PlayStation 4 as well as Mac and PC for November 2016. This didn't happen. As the years went by, development slowed down. It went from a promising concept to an unfortunate tale of expectations meeting reality, then eventually resources meeting their end. Although there were quite a few updates throughout development, silence eventually fell upon the supporters before being broken with a last update only accessible to backers of the project. Apparently in the end, Kevin offered refunds, but many people saw how much work was put into it and didn't ask for one. Yet as far as I can tell, no playable version was ever released in the end. However, conceptually, it was quite interesting, with this being an idea that came out around about the time when procedurally generated survival games were already kicking off. The survival aspect was similar in the way that you'd generate a new world, study your surroundings, and learn to survive. The interesting part about this is that as a dog, you don't have the ability to craft, so on-the-go foraging is a must, and they really were trying to go with a nose-led foraging approach where you can basically use your senses to suss out food sources. The impression that I got from this game is that it's very much in the moment, how it probably would be if you are a stray. When it comes to getting food, you can beg for it, rummage through trash, or steal it at your own risk. Because humans in this game were set to have varying temperaments towards you or just dogs in general. So what you do, even your mere presence, can provoke a different reaction. And other dogs could either be ideal playmates or territorial threats. But the one thing that really stood out to me as a guiding principle behind the stray experience is that the game was meant to make you feel how alienating it is to be in a place that wasn't made for you. I half quoted this earlier when talking about Stray, yet this on its own is such an important aspect to what making a game about being a dog in a human world is all about. Also, I'm well aware there's a plane about to crash into the apartment, but don't worry, because hey look, there's the cat from earlier fighting the plane in a high budget cutscene I put together, and yeah, Please subscribe. I'm struggling. Now, there's one aspect to all of these games that hasn't really come up yet, and it's combat. It was something that was clearly going to be in home free, and there are some examples out there where you play as an animal and obviously have to partake in combat. But the one example that I want to go back in time and bring up for this concept in particular is a game called Tokyo Jungle. Because this game has it all. Post-apocalyptic Tokyo, pets, zoo animals, and somehow dinosaurs. I will not elaborate further. With this being a roguelite, the goal is to simply survive for as long as possible. Everything is fast-paced, even the years go by like it's nothing. And that applies to combat as well as hunting. You see, combat in most cases is just a few quick attacks before going for the throat and turning your opponent into a pile of bones. Hunting is an activity that has you stalking through tall grass or just sneaking from behind before pouncing for the kill. Everything in this game is a snap decision, and fun fact, you can also play as prey, which really highlights this. You see, unlike a predator, as prey, you need to hide. Your combat skills aren't really up to scratch, and although you can technically take on other animals, your goal to survival is basically just avoidance and eating plants. When facing off against other animals that are ready to defend themselves, you'll also need to be on the lookout for when they pounce at you. So there's a bit of a dodging mechanic in this game as well. And you may notice that I'm fighting in a pack here. How a pack works is quite simple. If you lose the current animal you're controlling, then you'll control another from your pack, until eventually you only have one left. I like the pace of this combat. It's very arcadey but simple and to the point. I also enjoyed how inherently rewarding hunting was because it required some patience and timing to get the jump, especially when you've got the added pressure to find food fast. Now, food in this game isn't just important to survive, but it's also required to level up, because calories act as XP and you need to level not just for the sake of improving core stats, but also because it allows you to attract a better mate. Of course, with the ability to find a mate, there's a bit of a generation system in this game, and it's kinda cool how it works. This game contains one map with multiple sections to explore and take over. In each section, there are specific points to mark to secure it. Once secured, potential mates will arrive, you then pick one, find some hay, and do the thing. The caveat to this, however, is that there are 3 different types of mate: prime, average, and desperate. The reason why you'd always want to get a better mate is because with a better mate, you can pass down a higher percentage of your stats and produce more offspring to form a bigger pack. But here's the thing, to successfully court an above desperate mate, you need to level up. Leveling requires calories, and in this game, the brutality of it truly shows when there's no food in sight. For an example, let me tell you how this Pomeranian run ended in the saddest way possible. At first I was doing alright, but then when I moved on to the next generation, I noticed that the section I was in didn't have any food. So I went on to the next one, and that didn't have any food either, unless you want to catch birds, which can be tricky and takes up much needed time. I knew that I was going to be in danger very soon, not just because of hunger, but also because I needed to level up. Then whilst in the dark, I got jumped by a pack of wolves. Now, I could have run away to save myself and my Pomeranian pack, but I risked the fight and ended up alone because I felt pressured to do so for the sake of food. Unfortunately, after this, I was in too bad of a shape to take on the next area, which was also packed full of wolves. There was no easy prey for me to get here, so my plan B was just to secure all points of territory in the hope to get a desperate mate, because at least then I'd have a chance. However, that didn't happen. None arrived, and I was too low level to successfully secure the next generation, leaving me to basically bite the dust in the saddest way possible. The key point here is that I, as the small Pomeranian, was willing enough to fight a wolf pack for the chance to come out on top because the game pushed me into a corner. Combat isn't there for the sake of it. It has a purpose to be used out of necessity if hunting isn't an option. What I quite like about this game is that it often gives you the chance, the room, to bail out if the decision to fight was a bad one. But then again, combat is so fast paced that there is a chance for you to get out on top. If a developer were to take on the dog game concept now, I think combat should be seen as an option to survive, not a core focus. And to strengthen that point, I'm going to use another classic example called Wolf Quest, the 2007 survival eco-sim, because combat in this game has that element to it. Yes, you can be relentless if you want, but you don't need to be to chase off another predator or rival wolf pack. If you do enough damage and pose as a strong enough threat, the engagement can diffuse without being total. The whole idea to this is that it's not just you out here surviving, it's them as well, and they need to make that choice as to if they want to stay around for the fight or not. Now, I will admit that I haven't played much of this, but for the hours I spent, I can see why it's rated highly, and a big part to it is the territory system. It's all about establishing one and keeping control of it. As you can see, the game has its own sniffovision, but instead of hunting for minigames, you're hunting for prey, looking out for predators, and with regards to the topic of territory, sniffing out the rival pack if they don't already have the jump on you. In a nutshell, the territory system works like this. On the map, you see these marked hexagons that are controlled by other packs. Taking over one heavily relies on your presence, but also your activity. So you've got to chase off the other wolves, you've got a scent mark, you've got to howl, and you've got to hunt. It's a simple but fun and rewarding design that you can definitely bring into a city or residential area. I mean, it's not like we haven't seen a gang system before. However, there is a nuance to this change of environment, because in the wild, you've got things to worry about, sure, but rarely is it a human. In human society, you've got the police and potentially armed civilians or criminals that make the dog catcher look harmless. What's cool about this is how it could change your approach with other dogs, because to have humans as a witness can mean the difference between a small response or a big one. Yeah, you could get into a fight with another dog, but are they a stray that either nobody cares about or the dog catcher will be called in for? Or do they have an owner who will defend them? If not, call the police out of fear. Now, I do feel like there are a couple things worth mentioning with Wolf Quest. There is a DLC where you can explore a human town, but it's abandoned. And similar, but not the same to Tokyo Jungle, they have a generation system, which I guess could work in the dog in a human world concept, but already there are some concerns when you throw years into the mix. How will the city change over time, if at all? And if so, what's the limit? Are some of the first questions I would have. Now, to put combat to the side, there's something rather important missing here, something that we've barely touched on. And in a kid-friendly game, combat is less so expected anyway. However, there is something crucial to expect from this. When you look at Dog's Life, the actual case itself, what does it sell to you as the player? Freedom, and the rare opportunity to explore the world from a different perspective. You see, the thing is with Dog's Life is that even though you can technically free roam, besides the odd gimmick, there's really not that much to do. As you explore the world, you begin to realize that the intended fun is basically just completing quests, and your curiosity to explore is mostly rewarded by a bone or more scent marks that eventually lead to more bones. Actually messing about as a dog is very limited, and without making this whole point into GTA but dog, having the freedom to mess with NPCs, set up stupid stunts, and basically achieve non-in-game personal objectives affords massive potential for the player to just have fun with being a dog. Yeah, in Stray you can trip up the robots. I found this out whilst pausing the game. And as you've seen in Little Kitty Big City, you can mess about the humans too, although it's rather basic and can get old pretty fast. With the limitations of a dog considered, and the different places you can potentially explore, you can easily take the sandbox element further. There doesn't need to be some kind of bark ability that turns NPCs to jelly, but being able to move stuff about just to get to places you shouldn't, or using objects to disrupt the AI can motivate players to actually play with the world. It doesn't have to be Goat Sim, it can still be grounded, but what I like about that game is that you're rewarded for your curiosity just to do silly things. I mean, imagine breaking into a neighbor's house just to place somebody else's underwear on the bed. What kind of drama would that cause? Okay, cool, so messing about is the main point there, because it's fun to do, and I think it's worth including some kind of sandbox element to keep things interesting. And to go further, here's an example of where that can be taken if you want to include some kind of objective to the gameplay. Hello Neighbour 2, a game I didn't think I'd revisit within positive context, is a game that could work well if you swap out this IGN journalist for a dog. Because to be straight to the point, the town makes sense, it's the right kind of setting, and the challenge is a good one. You have a house or a business that you need to break into, you're given many points of entry to do so, objects to help with that, and tools to distract or lure away the hostile AI. You can already see that there's a bit of an immersive sim approach coming into play here, and if you go back in time a little bit, in one of the free alphas to this, you can have a lot of fun by just messing with the Birdman. It's obvious that I'm a sucker for physics and ragdoll effects, but that level of freedom just to mess about can easily lift the experience and keep the player curious. As a cat, you'd have the vertical advantage, but not so much as a dog. The challenge to navigate and access certain areas would require a different approach. And when it comes to the actual threat, we can look back at Bark for that with its aura sensing ability. In that game, you can rely on your natural senses. In Dishonored, it's magic. I'm not saying that we should make Hello Neighbour, but dog. However, it is one example as to where that sandbox element can go. And there's another example, in fact one that's pretty close. A game called Wanted Racoon, where you play as a raccoon in Raccoon City, full of people, police and even dogs who will lock you up if they catch you on sight. For an early access Unity engine project, it is a bit rough around the edges, but there are a couple cool ideas that would still work if you were a dog. Like using a skateboard, not just to get around, but also as a sort of trolley to carry things. And for stealth, using a box as a disguise. The Metal Gear Solid inspiration is a bit on the nose with the fact that they use the same sound effect for getting spotted, but one thing I really appreciate about this game is that it has environmental hazards. You can knock out NPCs with spilled water, electricity, or, to be honest, any object that has physics turned on. I swear to God, I'm not trying to make this all about ragdoll physics, but in one of the missions, the use of environmental hazards was done in a pretty cool way. You see, unlike a dog, you can throw things and knock people out. However, on a construction site with hard hats, that's not possible. So you need to think like a Chinese safety video and use the hazards around you to take out the threat. Obviously, as a raccoon, there's more legitimacy to use certain items, let alone craft things like a grenade. But unless there was some kind of contraption made for you as a dog, I doubt going around a shopping center putting people to sleep with a crossbow is going to be a thing. I don't know, maybe it could be that a raccoon actually makes that kind of gear for you. Who knows? But why even play as a dog? What's so unique about it? Everything we've talked about can apply to most animals anyway. Well, in a setting like this, it all comes down to their position in society. What's expected of a wild animal is obviously different to a domesticated one. Yet what is expected for a cat who can free roam the streets without suspicion is different for a dog that could seem lost if seen alone. Could you really walk the neighborhood on your own when everyone knows you and your owner? How would you be treated amongst strangers who assume your owner is nearby because they see that you have a collar? And if the collar is what keeps suspicion low, then what would happen if you lost it in a fight that you came out of looking worse for wear? Would people then see you as a stray that could potentially be a problem? What's interesting about it is that you may have unique freedoms playing as a dog, but the way the world sees you changes the way in which you navigate it. The point here is that dogs hold a weird position in society where they live in a world not made for them, but are largely welcomed on the condition that they behave a certain way. And with that, I hope you can see the door open to what I think is quite a cool concept. Something that I'd like to see a bit more of. The simple idea of playing as a dog in the human world. And with that, I'm going to go back to the gas station and say thank you for watching. Don't forget to check out the link below to download the free level to explore some of the set pieces in this video. And of course, thank you very much to my supporters who have made this video possible the way it is. I've got some bonus stuff for you in there as well. But finally, a massive shout out to all of my based wizards. Gibbles by the dozen, the Cuddly Bot, Negadan, the one with severed toes, Abby, the Meatly, Dorum Trollfist, Basto, Ali.Lair, SGT Chaos, Spooky, King Delirious, Bob the Bronto, Scotched Eggs, Big Ram, Grimber, LairOpener.mp3, Julie, Roland Deshane, I Don't Fit Through Doorways, Bork Lazar, and Jer. And I'll see you guys in the next one.